Welcome to Job Tips, the channel where we help you get, find, develop, or expand your job or career. Now, before we get started, please subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell to be notified of any new videos that we might provide. Thank you for that. Now, in this video, I'm going to go over several, up to about 10, interview questions that'll give you the leg up and keep you ahead of the pack during interviews. So, number one, tell us about yourself. When this question comes up, don't start talking about your family, your love for dogs or cats, those kinds of truly personal things. Be sure that your response has to do with your professional or work career, especially where you have excelled and done well. So think ahead of time prior to the interview about this question and all the other questions that I'm going to be mentioning, and have answers prepared, not scripted necessarily to where it seems mechanical, but where you can recall them pretty naturally and bring yourself, your professional side, your career side into the answer. Okay? And also be sure that the answer has a positive slant. So if there are any aspects of the answer that might be somewhat negative, do your best to turn it into a positive. And I'll give you some examples as we move forward. But for that first question, tell us about yourself. Keep it more relative to your career side of yourself than your personal side. Here's another great one. Why should we hire you? I mean, think about this. You might not know, other than you need the job. Well, don't tell them I need the job. That won't go over very well. But you can talk about your qualifications, especially if you know about the job description and some of the great details of the job. You can talk about your years of experience. You can talk about your background in terms of academic background, if it applies to the job. But also be careful not to just give general answers that most other candidates might provide. I'll come back to this in just a moment. I want to make one point clear, though. With all of these questions, bear in mind they're going to be interviewing potentially 4, 5, 6, 10, 15, 20 other candidates, and you want to make sure that your answers stand out, because many people will come up with pretty common plain vanilla answers. And if you are just among those plain vanilla answer candidates, you won't have any advantage. Okay? So you've got to think ahead of time about this question and the others to make sure that you stand above. So go back to, why should we hire you? Well, let's say that you don't even have experience within the industry. You can say things like, one of the advantages of hiring me is that I don't have industry insider experience so much that might limit my way of thinking or limit my level of creativity, or you kind of follow the point, because I have new and fresh ideas and I can bring something new and unique to the organization as we work our way through. Okay? So that's one way to answer it if in fact you come from outside the industry. If you're coming from within the industry and you have a lot of contacts within the industry and you already have business that you can bring into the company, let's say it's a sales type or a managerial type of position, certainly mention those strengths for sure. Here's another one. What are your strengths? Well, if you answer, well, hey, I'm a people person. I like doing this kind of work. Most other people will answer something similar to that as well. So bring up some strengths that you have. Strengths such as your organizational skills. Strengths such as your ability to hit targets, to hit your goals, to exceed goals on time or early and under budget, those sorts of things. Your attention to detail, your ability to have critical thinking where it is when it is necessary to accomplish the tasks at hand, and those sorts of things. And you will know more about what those kinds of strengths are from your own background as you think ahead of time about this question. Now, here's a good one. Tell us about some of your weaknesses. This is where some people get kind of hung up. Well, if you just say, well, I'm not very good with numbers, that won't serve you well. Or if you simply cite a weakness as a true weakness without sort of bringing it around to a strength, and I'll explain that in a moment, then this question won't serve you well. So I'm going to explain this in a bit more detail, but first, this question and many others in this type of interview scenario are designed, I won't say designed, but tend to be geared toward seeing how well you think on your feet. How quick are you in being able to respond to unexpected questions? They also sometimes will tell the interview panel some things about your personality, about your temperament, about those sorts of things. So let's go back to tell us about one of your weaknesses. One really good response that I like, and I say this because I've interviewed dozens and dozens and dozens of people over many years of my career, and I've used the following as well, and the following response, which I'll tell you in just a moment. And those that have the response I'm going to tell you have always sort of stood out in my mind. And believe it or not, fewer people than you think will come up with this. One of my weaknesses is I really don't have a tremendous amount of patience for mediocrity. In other words, I really try to excel above and beyond what is expected. And when I see others who may not strive to that level, it's sometimes a bit of a challenge for me, but then I try to encourage them to rise above it. You kind of follow where this answer is going. However it fits you, don't leave it in a weakness sort of position as far as the answer. Maybe your weakness is you don't like mediocrity, but then you always strive to excel beyond that. You follow my point? Whatever the weakness is, and you know what that weakness is, you know yourself, right, better than anyone else, find a way to turn that into a positive, all right, and it'll serve you well. Why do you want to work here? Well, if you simply say, well, gosh, I need the job, well, that might not do so well either for you. Hopefully you will have researched the company. Hopefully you will have gained some knowledge about some of the internal workings of the company, or if it is let's say a skilled labor type of a trade craft, and you really love what you do, and you've found out that the company is maybe a 5-star player in that industry. Maybe you're a home builder, maybe you're a carpenter, for example, and the company with which you are applying builds really nice high-end homes, and they really pay attention to great detail versus a bunch of tract homes or modular homes that they really don't have to be tremendously close on detail in a lot of areas. You can mention something like that. Say, well, I know I've researched the company. That will look good, by the way. And I like what I see as far as the company culture. I like what I see as far as the company's expectations of their work quality, or you kind of follow my point here. So why do you want to work there? Well, you could also say something like, the company's been around for so many years. I want to become a part of an organization that appreciates high quality, that appreciates people with attention to detail, that appreciates, kind of mention some of the things that are about you, if you will. And I like the culture, and I want to be a part of it. Something like that. You will know more specific having researched the company, and you'll have your own answers, right? But come up with something along those lines, and those answers will serve you well. How about, what do you bring to this job? I'm looking at my notes, can you tell? What do you bring to this job? Well, I have a lot of experience. Everybody else will say the same thing. I have a lot of experience, assuming that they do. And that's not so bad. You can say I have a lot of experience, but I also have, and you come up with some other things that are relative to really strengthening your role in that position. The reason I'm being a little bit less direct with this answer is because, well, there are hundreds of thousands of jobs and titles and companies out there that your answer will be very unique as far as what you bring to this job specifically. But what you can say in a more general, on a general sense, an answer that will work with most any company, or most any interview, I should say, is I bring attention to detail, I bring punctuality, I bring focus, I bring dependability, I bring a high level of skill, I bring, let's say you have certifications or you have degrees or you have whatever really qualifies you for that role, and you can mention how that will benefit the organization by you coming on board. Those are the things that you bring to the company. Now, if you're in sales, and let's say you have a client, some companies are kind of iffy about this, but if you have ethically, without violating your contracts with other companies, if you have a book of business that you can bring into the organization, that's super beneficial as well if you're in sales. Okay. How about this one? Why did you leave your last job? Now, on this one, if you were laid off, be honest. I was laid off. And talk about the reason why. If the company had a major profitability problem and they had to right size, downsize, correct the ship, whatever, however you want to word it, you can let them know, look, they laid off 2,000 positions, and my position happened to be one of those that was let go among the wave of people that went away. State it. Tell them that. Be very honest. They will find out what the truth is. If in fact you become one of those finalist candidates and they then do some research, some background research, they'll find out why you left your last job. If you if you left your last job because you hated the boss, don't say that. You could say some things like, at the last job there were some goals and some, I'm just coming up with some things that might fit right with you, that there's some things that the company was attempting to accomplish, and you were working toward accomplishing some of those goals. But in some of the political atmosphere around the leadership, it made it difficult for people to get things done. Let's just go there. Let's assume that it was because of your boss, but that was part of the reason you didn't like your boss. Say that in such a way that you don't impugn the character of your former boss. We'll talk more about that another time. In fact, coming up here in another question that I think, is that one of my questions? Oh, yes, it's one of the questions. But do it in such a way that you don't negatively speak about people specifically within your last job. But think about that question. Be sort of careful how you answer it, but study it and be prepared because it does come up a lot. Okay? If they just didn't pay enough, or maybe you got another degree or more certifications, and the company was not willing or perhaps unable to step up with more money when you got more academic qualifications or certifications or job skill qualifications, you can share that quite honestly as well. You can tell them, look, they had a great track record of providing bonuses and pay increases commensurate with additional education accomplishments or certifications or what have you, and they stopped doing that. So I went through, let's just use this as an example. Let's just say that you did this. Let's just say you say that I went through an MBA program, finished the program, and then they had a pay freeze. And so here we are now with an MBA or whatever the advanced degree is, if that applies. And now we're looking to increase the income commensurate to your education, and it just was not going to happen at that organization. No sweat. People understand that, and that won't harm you at all. In fact, it'll probably serve you quite well. Here's another one. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Now that depends on the position, the kind of work, the company. Most people will have some sort of response similar to, well, I want to have your job, or I want to move up within the organization. Yeah, okay. There's no right or wrong answer necessarily with this, and I wouldn't say that there is necessarily an answer that would really trip their trigger so much above others. But I would encourage you to answer somewhere along the lines of, as I grow in the position and in the experience and in the accomplishments within the organization, hopefully the organization will recognize those accomplishments and provide advancement opportunities. Or if I am so good at what I'm being hired to do, if I really love that job so much that I become the best there is, I may want to stay in that role and just serve this organization as the best in the industry in that job. Here's why I said that. Some companies only will hire, I don't say only will hire, some companies, when they hire people and they don't see the desire for someone to move up within an organization. For some reason, some companies don't think that that's a good thing. The majority of companies, though, if you are really super good at what you do and you are passionate about that, most companies will say, you know what, we're okay with you staying in that role as long as you want. Now, there are companies, there are exceptions. There is no all, none, always, never sorts of statements that I'll ever make, because there are always exceptions to that. But I think a company will appreciate the desire of someone who becomes exceptional at what they do and their desire to stay in that role, providing that level of quality to remain in that role as long as they'd wish. But you can also say, but if it serves the company better and the company would prefer that I move up to be a mentor to others in those roles, I'm more than happy to do that. So there's one way of addressing that question. Here's another one. What did you hate about your last boss? Now, I have asked that question because sometimes it's in these canned interview questions that that interviewers are required to ask, because those are the list of questions that the HR department provides, right? And sometimes that question is on there, and I've seen it happen. And I've had people say, well, he was an idiot, or she was terrible to work for. Don't give a negative answer. There may be something you did not like about your former boss, something that drove you nuts and that you hated about that person, but don't state it in such a way that makes that the point. You can say, let's just say your boss was just a pile driver, just high pressure and constantly pounding on people. Okay, let's just say that's the situation. And be truthful, right? So let's think about this for a moment. Notice this is all unscripted. I think this comes off my head from knowledge and from notes that I've taken and from studies I've done and whatnot. But this is not a scripted video. So let's think about this for a moment. So you hated that about your boss. And they say, what did you hate about your last boss? You could say things like, the last boss that I had expectations that were far above what most people were willing to perform at. So what we did was, and then you could turn it into something positive. We as a team, or I as an individual, made sure that I was able to rise to that level by doing this, this, and this, whether it was additional study, additional research, honing my skills, whatever it might have been. The point is, whatever it was that you hated about your last boss, turn it into, however, I did something positive as a result. So don't say you hated your last boss. Let's just say your last boss was an absolute stickler and was a tyrant if people were 1 minute late. Let's just go there for the moment. You could say something like, well, my last boss just went off on people if they were even 1 minute late, which I understand, because it's important for people to be on time or even a little bit early. Okay, so now here's another, so doing this, it's saying, okay, here's something that drove people nuts about the boss I just had, but I understand. And the reason is, so on and so forth. So there are things about, and think about this in your own life, things about people that you just don't like, but you understand why that is the way that person is about that situation. So it's an understandable situation. So the moral of the story, I guess, in this question, how I want you to think about the answer is, do not denigrate your former boss. Don't talk down about people you worked with before. What they're trying to find out in the answer that you're giving is, are you of a character that will slander or libel or just otherwise speak evil of your former employer? Because if you'll do that to them, you'll do it to these guys if you ever leave this company that you're looking to apply for, that you're trying to go to work for. So bear in mind, whatever your answer is, turn it into a positive and be understanding about that's what the situation was with the boss. So this is one of those questions where you really want to think ahead of time and have something planned out as far as how you're going to answer that question, because it does come up. Not in every interview by any means, but it does come up, and it comes up a fair amount. Okay? Always be positive during your response. Okay? Hope that made sense. And I think number 10 is, do you have any questions for us? Yes is your answer. Maybe not like that, but always have some questions prepared to ask the interviewers. The last thing you want is to say something along the lines of, well, no, like I said, everything looks good. When you ask questions of them, whatever those questions might be, it shows that you have more interest. It also extends the duration of the interview a bit, and it tends to open the conversation up to more avenues of conversation, where other questions that you might have will arise or comments that they might make. It becomes more conversational, I suppose. That's where, at that time of the interview, and that typically is toward the end of the interview, where it becomes much more, I'll say personal, but sort of, more conversational, more relaxed, because you're asking them questions, they're responding. It may elicit another question, they're responding, and you're kind of going back and forth. And they're really, what they're trying to do with that question is gauge your interest in the company beyond that interview. Okay? So that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. We're going to have many more videos to come. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have or you find the kind of job or career that you want to have.